I'm sitting here at Echuca, and this morning we went to Cummeragunja, a bit further up the river from here. But there's a backstory you need to know to Cummeragunja. It began in the 1860s. A young man came here. His name was Daniel Matthews, and his dad had been a slave trader in the Caribbean. Was converted to Christianity, became a temperance Methodist preacher, came to the goldfields down in Victoria. His son joined him, and then eventually moved up here to Echuca to start a business. But he was really grieved about the way the Aboriginal people were being treated and the way they were drifting into alcoholism and so on. And so as a sort of strict Methodist, he said, I've got to do something about this. He was a man of action, entrepreneurial but sort of strong-minded. So he began to try and recover the girls who were being chained up to the beds of some of the workers as prostitutes, basically. And he'd fight the men to set those girls free. He created a mission just up the river away from town called Mologa, and that's where the Aboriginal people would gather. It's been said, I think John Harris, the historian of One Blood, said it was probably the only safe place in New South Wales, along with Warringesta, that was safe for Aboriginal people. They'd come from a long way to come and to be here. So there's a mixing of the tribes, which was probably one of the complications for him. So he tried to have a strict sort of regime. They had little houses, they dressed European. He had a school. He brought in Thomas Shadrach James to teach, the Indian teacher from Mauritius, and created an environment there where he wanted them to learn to be Christians in the Western sort of style, I suppose. That probably got him offside with the Indigenous people. He probably trampled a bit on their traditional ways, and probably he was over strict in some ways, and that's why eventually they moved away up to Cummeragunja, which again was a reserve that he had created and bought for them up there to give them a safe place. His wife Janet worked alongside him. She was a very gifted woman. The Aboriginal people loved her, and right through their lives, even though the mission here seemed to fade, they travelled widely. He wrote widely to governments. He put letters in the paper on behalf of the Aboriginal people. The whole life was invested on behalf of the Aboriginal people. And eventually down in South Australia at Mannum, they worked together there right up to after the turn of the century. So it's an interesting little story and a brave one. And out of that, of course, came the school which trained the civil rights leaders that we know of, William Cooper, John Payton and Doug Nichols and Gladys. So, you know, in this area here, around Echuca, there was a little bright spot over against the dark chapters of what was happening to the Aboriginal people, engineered by some pretty brave and committed Christian people, business people. I think it cost them, they supported themselves. So it wasn't like they were just missionaries here trying to force religion on the people. They loved them. And they tried their very, very best to help them, and out of that came some very, very significant Christian leaders for the Aboriginal people, which eventually, of course, bore fruit a long time later, but it eventually did come, and it began with the efforts of people like Daniel and Janet Matthews right here in Echuca.